Good evening from Istanbul. It's almost 9 o'clock here, and I know it's still noon in Canada. And welcome to the final closing plenary of Friday of BELTA TESL Toronto web conference. Our closing plenary is with Dimitris Primalis. I'm going to introduce Dimitris to you, although I'm sure that most of you are familiar with Dimitris. He was 2013 Learner Technology SIG IATEFL Scholarship winner, and he has been teaching EFL for more than 20 years. He is interested in project-based learning, learning technology and exams, and he shares his experience through workshops and international conferences, IATEFL, TESOL France, ISTEK. He has a column in the BELTA Bulletin and has also written articles and posts for the IATEFL Voices, ELT News, Lingua, Franca, and Microsoft Partners in Learning blog. And he also has his own blog. And now I'm giving the microphone to Dimitris for his plenary.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? All right, until we receive feedback, great. Okay, so people can hear me. I would like to thank everybody for attending the lecture. I know it's quite late, especially for those living in Eastern Europe, and it's Friday night. Everybody wants to go out for a drink or go out with their friends. So thank you very much for being here. And I think we can start, but before we start, I was thinking, because more or less we all have had to deal with exams at one point in our life, and either as candidates or as teachers, we all make mistakes or saw mistakes. I would like to carry out a very small survey. So maybe John can help me here. I want your opinion on what are the most frequent mistakes candidates make at the exams. So all you have to do is tick the boxes that you like. You can actually tick more than one boxes. So while I'll be introducing the topic, feel free to vote. Now tonight, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. Even though I'm working at a private primary school called Zoukas in Athens, for most part of my teaching experience, I worked as an exam prep teacher. And I know that a lot of people work on that field. And what we're going to talk about tonight is not going to be something new. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. However, watching the World Cup these days, I often felt like a football coach. My students being the footballers on the football field, and me having done all the preparation and giving them the right directions. So what we're going to do tonight, we're going to refer to the most common mistakes that learners make and see how we can prevent them. And let this be a refresher for people who help candidates prepare for the exams. Well, I can see that most people say that task interpretation so far, it seems to be the most popular mistake, followed by limited range of vocabulary and grammar, and there are problems with timing as well, and word limits. Okay, well, we're going to check it again at the end of the session. Okay, great, thank you. All right. Well, I'm Greek. I live in Greece, and in Greece, people love exams. Everybody takes exams. There were times in the past when more than 100,000 candidates took various ELT exams every year. Well, therefore, ELT exams industry was a very big one, and lots of people worked on the field, and their job depended on how well their candidates did at the exams. And I know that most of them worked conscientiously, they worked really hard with the candidates. However, when the results came, they seemed to be disappointed. So let's have a quick look and see what might go wrong. So today we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about mistakes, and I'm going to give you some tips. We're going to talk about the commonest mistakes, in my opinion, which are task misinterpretation and missing points. The third one you're looking at is register, copying and pasting, paragraphs, sentences, genres, and of course towards the end, feel free to add anything else you like. And as Eva points out, exams are very popular in Turkey too. And they seem to be very popular worldwide because people need to certify their knowledge. So this is a must. And as this trend continues, more and more people would like to see their knowledge being certified. Therefore, that means that you will have more people asking to be prepared for exams. Before we start, though, I would like to refer to a misconception. I hear lots of people saying that students do not write anymore. There are lots and lots of teachers who claim that. But as I was browsing, I found this cartoon and I couldn't resist not using it. And I would like to thank the Cornerstone for teachers who gave me permission. The teacher is asking their students to write what they did on the holidays, and the answer is, can I just email you a link to my blog, miss? Students write, they do more writing than ever, as Tyson says, and this is a new reality that we have to face, and this is something that we need to take into consideration. Now, even though for more and more teachers find out things about the exams, especially now with the internet, and most examining bodies have got very clear instructions and guidelines, and they are easily accessible through the internet, a lot of candidates seem to be in the mist. What is the exam about? How many tasks do I have to fill in? I've also heard some horror stories saying things like, well, the examiners are determined to give us a fail anyway, so why should we try? Or there are other people who are spreading this rumor that even if you sign your name, you get 2 points. So all you have to do is just write a paragraph and you will pass the exam. While others simply claim that if you learn by heart a good model and you write it, that's it, you pass the exam. What I actually tried and did with my students, and what I found out that works well after discussions with other teachers, is basically giving them a guided tour. Now, every teacher who's preparing students for their exams, they always try to find out what the examiner is looking for. Now, this was taken from the Cambridge exams. This is from the handbook of Cambridge English Language Assessments. And as you can see, it focuses on 4 areas: content, communicative achievement, organization, and language. And accordingly, they are assessed. Now, I know what you're going to tell me. This is far too complicated even for teachers, and sometimes we need to ask for clarifications. It's true. However, you can easily do, and what I did with my students, was I created a similar table, and I gave them some areas to look for, some areas that they need to focus on, starting with clear message, the reader's reaction, whether they have included all the points, whether there are clear paragraphs, linking words, vocabulary, grammar. And as you can see, I have intentionally left the last part open because you know much better than I do what your students need to work on. So you can either customize that and give a student a personalized one, focusing on their needs, or you can give the class a guided tour of the exams at the very beginning and let them know what the examiners expect to read. It's much easier for the students to focus if they know what they're expected to write. Now, as Teresa correctly points out, they have been told several times throughout the year, and I agree with that. But if you give them a table, if you do that frequently, and they have a table to fill with the strong points and the weak points, something not threatening, something in terms of self-assessment. It just helps them focus on what they need to do. And from my experience, even teenagers who seem to be completely indifferent, they turned out to be far more responsible than I expected. All right, now let's go um, directly to what you might have faced in class. I bet you've seen this attitude before, haven't you? Television? Yeah, all right. I've written 3 essays about it. Okay, and because I've actually heard that many times from candidates who came out of mock exams or from candidates who came out from the exam room, well, let's see what they might be meaning with the word television. I want you to read this task, and I want you to tell me if the boy you saw in the previous slide was right. Is that about television? Exactly. No way. There's no way this can be talking only about television or about the advantages and disadvantages of television. But what usually happens is because they over-drill, they seem to be working on fixed models, and sometimes some teachers ask them to learn them by heart. Once they recognize one word on the task, they think they've found what they've been looking for. Now you can imagine what's going to happen when an examiner reads an essay written on television. Well, obviously, I don't think that they will be given a passing grade. All right. Now what I want you to do is I want you to read the letter on the right, on the left, on the left. And because there wasn't enough space on the slide, I can read it for you. Dear sir, I'm writing to complain about a pair laptop I purchased from Kotovolos. Well, that's a store selling electric goods in Greece on Monday, March 12th. Despite the fact that your company claims your products are designed to last for a lifetime, the laptop, model 2300, was out of order after 3 days. In specific, the monitor is completely blank and the laptop switches off after 5 minutes. The quality of the product clearly does not meet the reputation of your company and does not justify the exorbitant price of $2,300. I feel shocked by the low quality of the product and I look forward to your prompt reply. Yours sincerely, etc., etc. Well, it's all about letter, is it? Let's have a look at the task, though, on the right. And let's try and find out if there's something wrong there. Exactly. As Joanna points out, where's the replacement? Obviously, there seems to be a problem there. Exactly. Did not respond to the task. The candidate had clearly learned how to write good letters complaining about something, but either because they were stressed or because they were overconfident, what happened there? They forgot the main point. Exactly. There's something missing there. And it might actually be quite difficult to persuade students to read very carefully the task. In real life, if your boss asks you to send an email expressing the complaints of the company and asking for a replacement and you didn't do that, obviously you would be in big trouble. What exam is it for? It's very similar to IELTS. It could be a Cambridge exam, or it could be any other exam that the task requires to write a letter complaining, or a letter with transactions. Exactly. No clear action demanded, and there seems to be a big problem there. Right. Let's see one more now. That was taken from Cambridge again. I want you to read the paragraph on the right, and because the I suppose it's not that big, I could read it for you. Tom woke up by the sound of the phone buzzing downstairs. He groped his way down the dark staircase before reaching the living room. He turned on the light and looked at his watch. It was 2:30 in the morning. Who could have been calling him at that time? Was anybody in danger? Or was someone playing tricks on him? Does that sound like a bad story? It's only the first paragraph for a story. What do you think? This is FC level. This is B2 level according to Common European Framework level. All right. Now the question is, what do you think? Is that an interesting first paragraph? All right. No, it's not a letter. This is a story. This is the first paragraph of a story. And it's more or less what a very good candidate for a B2 level would write, at least in Greece. Quite interesting. All right. Now I want you to have a look at the extracts from the First for English handbook. It's the one you can see on your left. I want you to have a look at task 4. You have seen this announcement in an English language magazine for young people. Stories wanted. We're looking for stories for our new English language magazine for young people. Your story must begin with a sentence. Tom got off the train, and as the train left, he realized he was holding the wrong suitcase. Your story must include an address and surprise. So what seems to be the problem there? Obviously, it's a completely different task. The candidate has learned how to write nice stories, probably like the idea that they could start with Tom, but again, as Leo points out, they didn't respond to the prompt. They didn't meet the requirement. Exactly. And this is one of the most serious problems that your candidates can face there. Because I have seen candidates who were very good at writing. They were very, I was impressed by their pieces of writing. And when they came back, their writing results were extremely low. And there's only one logical explanation for that. They did not focus on their task. They did not respond to the task, to the prompt given in the way they should have. Okay, so let's see what the remedy might be. Either they can underline keywords. In this way, exactly, they don't read it properly. So what I usually ask my candidates to do is underline keywords. I know this is against what some exam bodies say. They usually ask them not to write on their exam booklets. But on the other hand, exactly, if you ask them to highlight, or if they use a pencil and then they erase it, it just helps them focus. Most of the times, they don't really have a clear mind when they have to write things. And obviously, they need to focus on the task. Now, another trick I use is I always ask them to think of who they're supposed to be. They're always themselves, but they're usually given a role. Are they a customer? Are they a candidate? Are they a friend? Are they a student? Are they a teacher? Why are they writing? Are they writing to give information, ask for information, both of them? Are they writing to persuade somebody? Are they writing to trying to give facts? Are they writing about the advantages and disadvantages of an issue? And who's going to read that? Now, this is very important because it deals with the issue of register. We're going to talk about the register later on, but I usually start the lesson with WH questions, and it always helps them focus. Who are you supposed to be? Why are you writing? Who's going to read it? If it's going to be the head teacher or somebody you don't know, obviously you need to think twice before writing in an informal way. Now, here's an attitude that I often faced with students. Um, what do you mean I'm not writing? I spend hours every night chatting and texting. Obviously, I can write English, and obviously I speak English, and I communicate with young people from all over the world. We play internet games. We exchange messages on Facebook, Instagram, any kind of social media, you name it. I want you now to have a look at the message written on the left. And I have to admit that this is not real work from the students, but this is more like a patchwork, gems that I selected from various students. Yeah, man, what you gonna do tonight? Are you free? Can pick you up at 8 from the airport and give you a lift to the hotel. Been here before? No? Let's go out and rock Athens. Gonna have a great time. Hags, tea. Does that make sense to you? Okay, it seems to be okay. Now let's have a look at the task on the right. A teacher from England is visiting your school to work on a European project. The head teacher has asked you to pick him up from the airport and give him a guided tour of the city before taking him to the hotel. Send him an email in order to find out about his flight details and arrange to meet him. I think it's far too friendly. It is very entertaining, I agree with you. But on the other hand, this is not something that would pass at the exam. Exactly, it's slang, and obviously the person who wrote even part of it using this register would be in big trouble. Now for a teenager, this is perfectly legitimate. This is how they communicate with each other. And there are also times that I found that teenagers feel very proud, and sometimes I think they're intentionally trying to show off that they can use the language in a nice way. So let's see what you can do about it. What you could try and do is try and invert the rules. What I often ask my students to do was I often ask them to write a Facebook message in formal English. Try to surprise their friends or their colleagues by writing something in formal English. Or on the contrary, I ask them to write an unusual letter of application, and the whole letter of application has to be in slang. They obviously enjoy that. And then they have to write a proper letter of application and see how the thing works. Before doing that, I usually use a table, and I divide language in three columns. We start with very formal language, semi-formal language, and informal language. For example, the word intoxicated is far too formal, and it's not used very often in English. It is, but it's rarely used in everyday English. So students have to find a semi-formal one that's used daily, and an informal one. In this way, you can raise awareness, and you can actually show them that they need to have a wide range of lexes, and they should show the examiner that they know which word to use on the right occasion. Another activity I like is split the class in two, and I ask them to narrate the same story for a tabloid and a Sunday newspaper. I use the Greek expression Sunday newspaper because in Greece, Sunday newspapers usually have more formal language, and they use better register, and usually they devote more time to arguments, etc., etc. This is an activity that I really like. And if you can't really find a tabloid or a Sunday newspaper,
John, Can you?
All right. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
I think we got booted. I did just hear you, Dimitris.
All right.
I don't see your webcam yet.
All right. I'll start in a moment. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yep, seems back now. Great.
Okay. Just a moment, I was talking about technology. I was saying that if you can't really find a tabloid or a Sunday newspaper, or if it's too expensive for you, you can ask your students to browse the internet, find a story, the same story narrated by a tabloid and from a more serious newspaper, and ask them to compare the register used. All right. There's one more issue that I think is quite important. I want you to read the task. This is a task that could be in any B2 level examination from the ones known. In Greece, there are about 15 exam bodies that hold exams. So it could be practically in any of those 15 bodies. The growing amount of urban waste and its disposal is a major problem for many cities all over the world. What do you think needs to be done to deal with it effectively? Give your opinion and support it with reasons and examples. Now, this is the first paragraph written by a student. I want you to read it. If you can't read it, just text me and I will read it aloud and tell me what you think is wrong there. It does look familiar, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. That's right. Yes, they simply repeat the wording of the title. And to be honest, if I were a teenager, it still would make sense to me. I mean, when I was their age, ages ago, last millennium, I had a similar feeling like the one that you're going to see in the next slide. Oops, sorry. I'm going to talk about it later on. Basically, what they cannot perceive is the idea of introduction and why we should use introduction. We're going to talk about it later on. Another thing that they usually do is they think that because the wording is really nice, it's the perfect solution for them to use it. And because it's copying and pasting exactly, there's no paraphrasing. And most of the times it's our mistake. We don't teach them how to paraphrase. And this is an academic skill that they have to learn anyway. Another thing that struck me, because I'm an examiner for Cambridge and CAMLA, and once I was an examiner at a big room, there were about 150 candidates, and I was just having a quick look. I was walking down the aisle, and I was struck by looking at the same word everywhere nowadays. Nowadays, one of the most controversial issues, it's those cliches. These words, these expressions that are used no matter what. Actually, in my experience, there were students who learned a nice introduction that could fit anything. And they always started with that. Now, there is an issue that you have to raise awareness about. Because to students, it makes perfect sense. I'm going to learn a few catchphrases and I'm going to start with them, or even better, one. On the other hand, though, you know and I know that they need to have a wide range of lexis to deal with a wide range of issues and a wide range of topics. Now, another thing that I often face as a teacher has to do with organizing. I want you to have a look. You don't have to read these two essays. I just want you to have a look at it, and I want you to tell me if there is something wrong with these two essays. You don't have to read them, just have a look at the paragraphs. We're going to talk about activities later on. But right now, what seems to be the problem? Paragraphs are a bit inconsistent. That's right, Leo. The second one is too short. That's right. And the first one is too long. Very nice. That's right. Yes, thank you, Celia. Uh-huh. Exactly. Have a look at the one on the left. I love living in the city because it is a wonderful place. And then you've got two more paragraphs explaining that. And the conclusion being what? Practically the size of the second and the third paragraph together. Obviously, there are very good elements in there, Leo. I agree with you. But I clearly think that what it shows, what it indicates, is that most of students, especially when they're teenagers, and sometimes not only teenagers, what they usually do is they write impulsively. They often believe that writers get their inspiration and then they start writing. In real life, we know that writers spend quite a lot of time, and they usually have drafts, and they usually work on how to organize their writing. Now, have a look at the one on the right. What seems to be the problem with the one on the right? I agree with you, Fatima. Yes, either we build a house or like an we need a plan. Yes, it's true. It's true. Now, if you have a look at the third paragraph, you might also find out more problems. The disadvantage the city has is that there is a lot of pollution and traffic, and people do not like that. Is that a properly structured paragraph? This is typically what a teenager or what a B2 student who hasn't really worked very much on structuring and organizing, this is what they usually might come up with. And it's an admirable effort, but exactly, it's what Michael says. There's no elaboration. It's just a sentence. So trying to wrap up what we've said so far, let's have a quick look at what teenagers and what candidates usually think, and let's see how we can deal with that. Now, the first problem that I had when I was a teenager was, are they stupid? Why do they need an introduction? Isn't it obvious? It is obvious, and let's face it, exam bodies cannot give candidates something highly specialized. They cannot ask them about biology, they cannot ask them about rocket science. So obviously the topics they have to ask them, and very often they know that the candidates are pretty young, they have to be something that they can know, something that they can write about, something which is relevant to their schematic knowledge. In other words, the knowledge of the world. So what I found useful with my students was trying, first of all, to explain. Try to explain what the outline should be, and I usually ask them to draw bubbles. I didn't draw bubbles here because there wasn't much space for the bubbles, but I usually ask them to draw bubbles. Can you hear me now? Okay. We ask them to write bubbles, each bubble for one bubble for each paragraph. In the introduction, I ask them to say what the essay is about, give them a clue. And I remind them that they might know a lot about technology, but their grandfathers would not know many things about it. Then we work on topic sentences, reasons, and examples. And finally, in the conclusion, which is the most challenging part, because by then they've spent most of their time working on it, they don't really know what to write. Sometimes they write things they have never written before, which is tricky. Sometimes they come up with the same wording that they have used in the second and the third paragraph. And what I usually find useful is I tell them, if I could remember in a couple of lines what this essay or what this article was about, what would it be? In a couple of lines. Yes, what you've written is admirable, it's great, it's wonderful, but if I took with me a couple of lines, what would it be? And it usually helps. I think they usually grasp the notion of what a conclusion should be like. Now, another issue that I usually have with students is in the paragraphs themselves, what they have to write in the paragraph. I want you to have a look at the two paragraphs. They're on the very same topic, but they face two different problems. Have a quick look. If you can't read it, just let me know and I can read that aloud. Exactly. The first one is a huge period. That's right. Mm-hmm. It is a huge period. It's too many things that the candidate had in mind. They sort of tried to cram everything into the paragraph. What about the second one? That's right, Evgenia. It's far too simple. Mm-hmm. Yes, Sylvia. It's not very engaging. It's badly written. That's right. Mm-hmm. All right. And it usually has to do with well, the first issue that the second paragraph has is very short sentences. Usually you have to keep a balance and try and help students realize that they shouldn't write something far too complicated, more than they can deal with, nor should they write something which is far too simple. I think the second candidate, because I know what she wanted to do, basically she was trying to be on the safe side. She thought that if she if she takes risks, and if she uses a range of grammatical structures, then she risks getting a low mark. In reality, she would probably get a low mark because grammatical structure is practically non-existent there. As Tara points out, there is no sentence variety. And there's another thing they should know. I often tell my students that the examiners do not know them. They cannot know what they know, and their only chance to show them is by displaying what they know in their essays. Now, another issue that students have, and that's my favorite one, I got that from the internet, is punctuation. And yes, sometimes they lack thinking skills in L1 too. It's true, Sylvia. I agree with you. And sometimes as an ELT teacher, and in my case I am an EFL teacher, English as a foreign language, you do have to develop that as well. And from my experience, I found that they very often they find topics that they cannot talk about, not because they don't want to, but because they've never met them in their life before. So very quickly, what I usually do with punctuation, because I've got students who think that full stops, commas are not necessary, apostrophes shouldn't be there at all, is I usually raise awareness. And this is my favorite one, because I ask them to decipher what the writer meant and what kind of message was conveyed. Another favorite example of mine with higher levels is the sentences you can see under the who needs punctuation. You will receive a refund for the products which are faulty. You will receive a refund for the products which are faulty. It's not the same. Obviously, there's an issue if you write the first one. And as Sylvia says, it's humor that makes a difference. Either working with teenagers young learners, adults, it usually works as long as it's non-threatening. And what I usually do is I copy and paste parts of what they write without mentioning names, making sure that nobody can identify who's written that, and we talk about it. And I have to say that they're very, very precise when it comes to giving feedback. Because we don't have that much time, and let's move on. Now that's my favorite problem. One genre fits all. Okay. This was actually written by a student of mine. I want you to have a quick look and tell me, I want you to try and identify the genre. That's a good question. Is it a report? A letter? A hybrid. Uh-huh. It looks like a report, as Evgenia says. It doesn't have a title in its paragraph as it should. Quite interesting. Now the thing is, very often we focus on letter writing because this is, or email writing, because it's a real life task that they have to deal with. But candidates, especially if they're young, or if it has got to do nothing with their everyday life, they're not familiar with other genres. And the problem is that they can't be bothered. They think that once they know how to write a letter, everything looks like a letter. So basically, first of all, you try to raise awareness. What I usually do is I usually play games with them. I cut out pieces of writing, and they have to identify the genre, whether it's a story, whether it's a letter, whether it's an essay, judging from the layout, the way the paragraphs are organized, whether they're headings or notes. Now, another very useful activity that I do with my students, whether they're B2 level or C1 or C2, for proposals and reports, I give students 5 minutes. I give them the task, and I give them 5 minutes and ask them to come up with the headings. And because coming up with headings is quite difficult, they can do that in pairs or in groups if they want to. Groups of 3, not more than that. It's amazing how fast they learn to work with headings, and how fast they can come up with beautiful and creative headings. But to me, the key word is simply raising awareness. They're not aware. If you just say it once or twice, it doesn't really work. Yes, and as Patricia says, collaborative learning helps a lot. Now, another task I usually do with them is I ask them to match the extracts with the correct genre. Some extracts, not the whole thing, and they have to match them. Then they usually have to identify genre, register stereotypical expressions used with different genres, layouts. And now there's another issue that I often face. They never finish in time. Very often when students write, they tend to disregard time limits. And when you write at home, you can actually listen to your favorite piece of music. You can do it either in the living room, or you can start it now and finish it after 2 hours. And that's fine. You can always come up with something nice, a nice piece of writing. But the problem is that they don't realize that when you go into the exam room and the door closes behind you, then obviously you're under pressure. So basically, what I start telling them from day one is that I'm a Greek native. My mother tongue is Greek. But if I'm asked to write an essay in Greek in 30 minutes, in all likelihood, I won't make it, because I haven't written an essay in Greek for more than 20 years. It's not that I don't speak the language. It's not that I cannot write. But if I don't practice, there's absolutely no way I can meet the time limit. And what you can see depicted there is more or less my approach to exam prep classes. I usually start with teaching. Most of the part goes to teaching, and I don't worry so much about timing. And as time progresses, I start testing them. I usually start testing them in terms of sentence level, paragraph level, linking words. And I usually ask them to take 1 or 2 mock exams. If you're not familiar with mock exam is a simulation of an exam. And there the students have to they have to write a task within the time given at the exam. Now the tricky part is, if you ask them to take a mock exam a week before the exam, you don't have enough time to give them feedback. Or if you give them feedback, they don't have enough time to change something. If, however, you do it a few months before the exam, A, you raise awareness, B, you can actually give them time to work on that. Here's a very, very, very quick revision exercise for you. This is from my blog. The idea for this talk started from a post I wrote on my blog. Task misinterpretation. I usually ask students to underline keywords. If they exceed the time limit, I ask them to take mock exams for organization. Sometimes I play games with them. I cut out sentences from a paragraph, and they have to rearrange them so that the paragraph makes sense, or I give them paragraphs in jumbled order, and then they have to put the paragraphs in the right order. Limited range of grammar and vocabulary. What I would say is ask students to mark model compositions. Most publishers usually provide models at the back of the student's book or at the back of the teacher's book. Make good use of that. Even in the handbooks, you will probably find models. And it doesn't always have to be a good model. Sometimes it does help to have 2 models, a good one and a very weak one. And of course, strong register. Now, finishing, because I know that you probably have some questions to ask me, I would say you need to raise awareness what the examiners expect. Give them the checklist that we saw at the beginning, or modify it, customize it according to your students' needs. Insist on a rough outline and notes. Even if they don't have time to draw an outline, they can do it mentally. But on the day of the exam, you do what you've been trained to do. If they're trained to take exams and create an outline, they will probably create it mentally if they don't have time to draw one. At the beginning of the course, I focus on content, and it's not timing so much. And let me say that with writing, you need to start on day 1. Unfortunately, it's one of the skills that needs to be worked on very much, very well, very thoroughly. And it needs to be practiced on a steady basis. I usually organize 1 or 2 mock exams, and students usually voluntarily take the exam. And the most important of all, I give them feedback. And I think that once they're given feedback, and they're giving directions, then because they're motivated, they all want to pass the exam, they know where to focus on. I would like to close that by saying that on the day of the exams, your students will be sailing all alone. But you can ensure that they will not be sailing in uncharted waters. Because no matter how much you want to be with them, they will be there on their own. I don't know if there are any questions. At least I can't see any questions here. Hold on. I can't see any questions. Eva, can you see any questions?
Right.
All right.
I think it was very clear, and you gave great examples, but I'm just checking if we missed any questions.
All right, I think I can see one now. How about students who have problems with more than one aspect of their writing? I would actually say that some students are good at writing some genres, some others aren't. When it comes to, because I attended Jose Luis Serra's presentation plenary earlier, and she was talking about creative writing. If they're good at creative writing, encourage them to work a little bit more on that. Try to prioritize them. I would say that the most important one is to make sure that whatever they write makes sense. If the examiner cannot make sense of what they've written, then obviously there's a big issue there. If they, for some reason, they can understand and they convey the message, because that's what the whole thing is about, conveying message. And with most examination bodies, the very idea, especially when it comes to B1, B2, even some C1 level exams, is basically ensuring that the message is conveyed without offending the listener, the reader. If they don't offend the reader and they manage to convey somehow the message clearly, then in all likelihood they've passed the exam. Of course, it does depend on the exam body. It all depends on the directions they have. But from my experience, more or less, these are the guidelines that people have. And in real life, if what you manage to write conveys the message without offending anybody, without misunderstandings, more or less, you will be excused for any kind of mistakes you might make. Problems usually start when there are misunderstandings, when you can't convey the message, or if for some reason you offend the reader. Eva, can we have a look at the survey, just out of curiosity?
I think John has it somewhere.
All right. Oh, wow. The champion is tough misinterpretation and missing points. And limited range of lexis. Uh-huh. I see, right.
Punctuation as
Okay.
well, as you mentioned. Timing.
Timing. That's right. And let me add that when it comes to limited range of lexis, what really helps them is reading. Encourage them to risk. Encourage them to use new words. And encourage them to paraphrase as much as possible. Students tend to stick to a couple of things that they learn, and they tend to use them again and again and again. On the contrary, try to encourage them, reward them if necessary for any new vocabulary they use. All right. Well, thank you very much. I would like to thank you for being here on Friday evening. I would like to thank BELTA and Toronto TESL for their help, the support, and for giving me the opportunity to share this plenary with you. Below you can see my Twitter account and my email. If there's anything you need, feel free to contact me. And I would like to thank Eva and John and Tyson for helping me with carrying out this plenary.
And we would also thank you for this great session, Dimitris. It was very useful, very fruitful. And we would like to thank everybody for coming and being with us for this last session of today's BELTA Toronto TESL web conference. Good evening, good afternoon. See you tomorrow.